What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Katson's Corner, the show where we talk about college football and the NFL draft from a Chargers perspective. I am back. It's been a couple of weeks since I saw you guys last. This month has been kind of a rough one. I had no power last week, and so that's why there was no episode. But you guys have seen me on the post-game live stream a couple of times this month, so hope you guys are comfortable with that sort of swap out. But we're back to talk about some more NFL draft prospects. This week, we're going to talk about a couple more guys that have been invited to the Shrine and Senior Bowls as invites for those All Star games continue to roll out. We have a pretty big list to choose from for the last 2 weeks here. Um, both games starting to ramp up a little bit, get all of those invites out. Looks like it's going to be a pretty tight battle for the quarterback class. Not that that matters to us Chargers fans, of course, but it looks like those two games are coming a little bit closer as far as level of talent than they have been in quite a few years, which is very exciting for me as someone that is going to be attending both of them. Of course, if you guys know anything about my content outside of this channel, you know that I am a huge NFL draft guy. I will be doing a bunch of NFL draft content once the season ends, starting with going out to those games at the end of January, the Shrine Bowl in Dallas, and then the Senior Bowl in Mobile. So we're going to talk about three guys that have accepted invites to the Shrine Bowl, and then three guys that have accepted invites to the Senior Bowl. Before we do that, make sure you guys do all the YouTube stuff as usual. Subscribe to the channel, make sure you have the notification bell on, etc., etc., etc. If you want to find me and my content, you can go to Alex Katson, the same way you see it spelled on the screen on Twitter. You can also go to just Katson, just my last name, Katson, on Blue Sky. I am over there as well. Been posting a little bit more over there over the last couple of weeks. Really excited about the growth that that platform is showing. So, um, with all that out of the way, we will go ahead and get started. And we're going to start with a Colorado wide receiver. So the Shrine Bowl took a bunch of Colorado guys, including Shador Sanders, which was a huge get for them, really bolstered their class. And part of, it seems, the deal to get Shador Sanders to come to Dallas and throw at that game is that they took five other Colorado players, including his brother, Shiloh Sanders, who's a safety, another safety, Cameron Silman Craig, who we will probably talk about a little bit later in this process. I do like him a fair bit, and three of Colorado's top wide receivers, not including Travis Hunter, who I don't think will be playing in an all-star game, given that he is one of the favorites to be the number one overall pick right now. But they took Jimmy Horn Jr., they took LeJontay Wester, who transferred in from Florida Atlantic this season, and they took Will Sheppard, who transferred in from Vanderbilt. He's 6'3", 205. Really liked him when he was at Vanderbilt. I thought he was a really underrated wide receiver there when he was in the SEC. Obviously, Vanderbilt has been a little bit more of a buzzy program this year with Diego Pavia and all the changes that they've made. But when Shepard was there, really was still kind of the basement tier of the SEC. I thought that he was kind of going under the radar just because of the team that he played for. Transfers up to Colorado this year, had a little bit of interest from Georgia. I think that he was actually committed to Georgia at one point, but ending up landing at Colorado instead. But either way, super smooth route runner and separator. I think there's going to be no problems about him finding space in the NFL. Really excels as a high point player. His catch radius is fairly large in general, but especially like if you get that ball up high, he's going to be able to utilize his size, make a play on that. There are going to be some questions about his productivity. He's never gone over 800 yards in a season. Obviously, part of that is, again, like playing for Vanderbilt offenses that are not the greatest, with some quarterback play that has not been the greatest. And then this year at Colorado, there's a lot of mouths to feed on that offense. Again, three guys going to the Shrine Bowl plus Travis Hunter. You have just a lot of people to throw the ball to if you're Shador Sanders. And so he's kind of spread out the ball a little bit, hasn't really keyed in on one receiver other than Hunter, of course, too much. And so Shepard's opportunity has not been like super huge in that respect. So there probably will be some questions about whether or not he can really be like a wide receiver one or two at the next level, just because he hasn't really done it before. I would argue he was Vanderbilt's wide receiver one those years that he was there, but again, like in an offense that like really didn't produce very much, there's going to be some questions about whether or not he can kind of take that leap. I do think that like his technique against press coverage and against physical defensive backs needs some work despite his size. I think that's something you can kind of work through. Um, But really, this is going to be a guy who's more of a vertical threat, even though he doesn't have really like elite top end speed. I think he's going to be like in the high 4.4s, low 4.5s region, probably. So, not like a true burner, but is going to be someone who really is able to stack defenders and get vertical, add sort of that element to the offense. Again, like we've seen over the last couple of weeks, the Chargers trust Quentin Johnston in that role, and he's kind of not really produced in that role, kind of has struggled to create some separation downfield. And so I think if that's an issue that you have, right, then you can kind of bring Sheppard in. I think he'll be more of a middle round guy, which is where I think the Chargers are going to be targeting a wide receiver anyway if they do decide to go the draft route. And I think that that makes sense as sort of a complementary piece to kind of add the thing that the Chargers are missing right now. Moving on here to Auburn tight end Rivaldo Fairweather. This is a guy that's been on my radar for a few years. Transferred up from Florida International between the 2022 and 2023 seasons. Thought his 2022 season at Florida International was really, really good. I was really excited about him. Has kind of gotten lost in the shuffle a little bit at Auburn. Quarterback play hasn't been the best for him with Peyton Thorne over the last couple of years. But he's 6'4", 252 pounds. Really huge catch radius over the middle. He's got great length. Really plays in traffic well, shows solid ball tracking ability. I think that he is like your kind of your prototypical, stereotypical tight end where it's like you can throw him a contested ball over the middle and he has the length and the hands to make those contested catches. Um, Good vision as a blocker. He really knows how to set up blocks well. I think that he's a really effective cog in the machine in run blocking. He's not necessarily like a standout blocker on his own, but I think he knows concepts very well. I think he knows how to set up rush lanes very well. He isn't like the fastest player of all time. He's not like super quick in space. And so, defenders can get around him a little bit. But if he catches a defender kind of leaning the wrong way or something, he can kick that guy out and open up a lane, seal off a lane, that sort of thing. Is going to be a little bit of a limited route tree coming out. Auburn is a pretty spread out offense, and so they haven't asked him to do a ton of different stuff. He is at his best running downfield. I think he's going to be at his best kind of as a seam threat, but he doesn't really have like the top end speed or like super great acceleration to be like a consistent field stretching tight end. And so you kind of want to get him on sort of like vertical routes where you're throwing the ball quickly, which is kind of an oxymoron. So kind of like some of these like quick seams, which we've seen Herbert throw a little bit this season, like to Will Dissly, for example. I think that it's sort of a similar style of player. I think that Fairweather is probably a worse blocker than Dissly is, but it's kind of similar it's a similar vein to what they have with Dissly right now. Obviously, I know a lot of Chargers fans want like more of a true receiving threat at tight end, but I think that just like the way that the offense is constructed and the way that they want to play football with this Chargers team with Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman and everything, blocking is going to be a huge consideration. That's part of the reason why we included Sheppard on this too. I think Sheppard is a really good blocker for his size, and so there's a little bit of that aspect to it as well, where I think that like you're going to have to be able to block at least a little bit to be on this team. I think that that's just going to be part of the calculus for them. And so, even though Fairweather isn't like the best receiver, um, I think that he's still going to be in the mix. He's going to be a later round guy. I think this tight end class is pretty deep. I still like Fairweather kind of in the later rounds, but I think that it's going to be more of a depth play, more of a kind of add what we already have in case, Will Dissly gets injured or something like that. Then you have a similar player that you can kind of plug and play in if that does happen. And then last one for the Shrine here, big get for them just a couple of days ago. Shavon Revel Jr., the East Carolina cornerback, who went into this season as one of the candidates for CB2, I guess it would be, because Travis Hunter is going to play corner in the NFL, in case you're not aware. Or at least I think so, right? I think Travis Hunter is going to mostly play corner, and then he's going to get, 10, 15 snaps on offense once he gets to the NFL. That just makes more sense than him playing wide receiver and dabbling at corner because you're going to use him on both sides of the ball. That's just going to be what it is. But you can't really plug in a guy for like 10, 15 snaps at corner as easily as you can build an offensive package for him to come in for 10, 15 snaps on offense. It's the same way we saw with like Champ Bailey back in the early 2000s, the same thing that happened with Jabril Peppers early in his career. all of these guys kind of go that route. So Travis Hunter is going to be a corner in the NFL primarily. I think with that knowledge, he's pretty solidly corner one. But Revel is someone that was really in the mix for corner two with Will Johnson and Benjamin Morrison at Notre Dame, who's hurt, and a couple other names in there. Revel is a junior college transfer. He transferred from Lewisburg Junior College to East Carolina a couple of years ago. Really strong straight line speed. I think he's going to be in the 4.4s, if I am not mistaken. He is a little bit older, fifth year senior, not really the traditional path, going from junior college to a G5 school, but East Carolina is a pretty good G5 program. Did have 12 pass breakups in 2023, which is a pretty high number, really productive on the ball. Had a really nice game against Jim Harbaugh's Michigan team, actually, that was kind of the catalyst for his NFL stock. Did tear his ACL in late September, but if you think about ACL recovery times these days, it's about 9 months anymore. And so if you go from late September, take that out 9 months, that's about June, late June, early July, that he'll probably be fully cleared to go, which means he should be ready for training camp. And from all the reports that we've gotten about Revel's injury, it seems like it's a pretty clean tear, no complications, which means he should be right on that 9 month timeline. No like extended timeline that there's going to be unless he suffers a setback kind of in his rehab over the next couple of months here. So probably not going to be someone that plays in the Shrine Bowl, but getting out there and getting in front of teams and doing interviews and everything to kind of lessen the load that he's going to take as far as interviews at the combine, I think is really smart for him. Someone that I'm really excited to get the chance to talk to if I can when I go down there, because he is right on sort of the round one, round two bubble right now because of the injury. And so if you're the Chargers, who are at the back end of round one, the need for cornerback is a little bit nebulous right now because of the play that you've gotten from Cam Hart and Tarheeb Still on the outside as rookies from the fifth round, right? Christian Fulton has been a little bit up and down since coming back from his hamstring injury a couple weeks ago. I think that the last two games that he's had have probably been his worst two games of the season so far. And so there's probably a conversation to be had and a conversation that will be had in that building about whether or not to re-sign him because he is a free agent after the end of the season. You don't necessarily want to go into next year with two fifth round second year players as your penciled in starters at corner, no matter how good they play. That's just not really something that you see NFL teams do very frequently. I think Asante Samuel Jr. is pretty much as good as gone as a free agent after the season. So there's really not anyone else outside of Dean Leonard that's going to be in that room. And so if you're not super stoked about the idea of re-signing Fulton, then you probably want to add a corner pretty early in the draft just to try to get a guy. I think that that's still doable, especially because Still has the versatility to play in the slot as well. I think Ja Taylor has been fine in the slot, but not like to the point where I don't think that he should, like, not to the point where I think that he should have that starting job unquestioned going into the season. And so I think if you want to take an outside corner and you don't like the way the rest of the board falls, because there are going to be some bigger needs, obviously, that come up. Tight end is one of those. Defensive line, sort of in general, whether that's defensive tackle or edge rusher, kind of depends on what they do with Poona Ford and T.R. Tart. Wide receiver is going to be one that a lot of fans are going to be clamoring for as well. Running back, even like if Ashton Genty falls a little bit, I could see that happening. So there's going to be some other needs that you kind of have to parse out as well. But if you don't really like the way the board falls at those positions and you want to take a corner, Revel will probably be right in that range roughly. He might get a little bit up outside of that Chargers range, just depending on how everything goes with his recovery and how confident teams are that he's going to be fully ready for training camp. But if it's something where you want to address corner early on and you want to get a guy that can play on the outside, this staff has seen him play before with Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter and Steve Klinkscale, the DB coach. They've seen him play. They've played against him before. They know what he is, kind of more so than some of these other teams might because they've had to game plan for him before as a college coaching staff. I think that it makes a lot of sense. I think that it's someone that makes a lot of sense at the back end of the first round to kind of add to the corner room. Then you go into next year with a starting duo, probably of Revel and Cam Hart. You have Tarheeb Still and Jaw Taylor battle it out in the nickel. I think that still probably wins that competition. And then you have some versatility built in where then, if Revel or Hart goes down or Revel isn't ready to start the season or something for whatever reason, then you can kick Still out to the outside. You still have Taylor in the slot. Dean Leonard is still there competing. Obviously, Leonard and Taylor are big special teams guys. And so I think that that sort of builds out the room a little bit more if that is the route that you want to end up going. All right, moving over to the Senior Bowl side, they got a commitment from Michigan running back Kalel Mullings. I think it was last week. He's 6'2", 233 pounds, so pretty big for a running back. If you think about like how big Derrick Henry is, it's fairly similar. I think Henry is 6'2", 240, I want to say. So similar size. I think not necessarily super similar profiles, but similar size type guys. Mullings moved from linebacker, excuse me, to running back in 2022. Had some injuries on that side of the ball for Michigan, if I remember correctly. I think sorry, not Edwards. Blake Corum was hurt, and then I think Edwards got a little bit banged up, and then like some of their depth guys got banged up too, and so they had to move Mullings over. So has only really been playing running back full time for a year and a half, 2 years now. Great short yardage back. I mean, again, you look at the size, you look at sort of the comparisons for what a running back of that size looks like, and it makes a lot of sense why he's a great short yardage back. He's just huge and he's super powerful, great runner in short yardage. I think that he is going to be someone that has a lot of value as like a goal line back, a short yardage back, that sort of thing. Ton of special teams experience. He has 381 snaps on that side of the ball, both from his time at linebacker and his time at running back. Has still played special teams pretty consistently this season, despite being a de facto starter. I think he's been better than Donovan Edwards this season. I don't really think that it's been particularly close. I think that he was probably better than Donovan Edwards last season too, as sort of the RB3 behind him and Corum. Doesn't have a ton of receiving value. Obviously, again, transferring over from the defensive side of the ball, most of those guys, as the old adage goes, you play defense for a reason. It's because you don't have any hands. And then, being a bigger guy, not going to be really like a huge part of his game. Obviously, most of the time, those like super high end receiving backs are a little bit smaller, a little bit more compact or lighter at the very least. But I think that he is a very good proxy for what the Chargers thought that they were going to get out of Gus Edwards this season. Edwards has kind of struggled a little bit, had the ankle injury that put him on IR for part of the season. He's kind of struggled to get going. His yards per carry has not looked good so far this season. He is under contract next year, but it's not a large enough contract where the Chargers can't get out of it if they really need to. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins is going to be a free agent as well. Um, I think the conversation around re-signing him is going to be another decision that the Chargers have to make. At this point, I would probably bring him back. I don't think it's going to be super expensive to do so. And depending on this knee injury, he still has a chance to become the Chargers' first 1,000-yard rusher since Melvin Gordon. So I think that there's still some optimism there. I think that you're happy with what Dobbins has given you this season. I think you probably bring him back. And if you do bring Dobbins back, then that makes it a little bit easier just from a like complete reconstruction perspective to move on from Edwards, because you at least have then Dobbins and Kamani Vidal returning. I think Haskins is a free agent after the year. I didn't check that before recording, but I think that that's true. And so if you want to add someone that's going to be like the short yardage sort of RB2, again, like Gus Edwards doesn't really provide a ton of receiving value either. His value on third downs is mostly pass blocking. Mullings is a pretty good pass blocker. He's above average, I would say, for a college running back. Part of that goes back to his days at linebacker, so he has a pretty good understanding of where blitzes are coming from, at least at the college level. I think that he'll probably have to improve his technique a little bit in order to stick as a like very good pass blocker in the NFL. But it's sort of a similar profile to what Edwards gives you. And if you're not happy with what Edwards has given you this season, I think that Mullings makes a lot of sense. Obviously, the Michigan familiarity as well. And so I think that that sort of all balances out to be someone that I think the Chargers will be definitely interested in the very least. Moving on here to Central Arkansas edge rusher David Walker. This is a guy who, much like Fairweather, has been on my radar for a couple of seasons. I had a buddy who was a student assistant at Kennesaw State before that program moved up to the FBS level. Shout out Hunter if you're watching this. And so they were in the same conference as Central Arkansas when they were down at the FCS when my buddy was working there. And he texted me during the 2022 season and he said, "This guy is an NFL player. Put him on your big board." And then he didn't come out that year. And then I was like, okay, well, whatever. And then he came back. It's his sixth year of college at this point. And so I was kind of like, like sixth year FCS player, not really like super stoked about it. Wasn't really like keeping like close tabs on him or anything, was just kind of like a name that I knew. And now he's at the Senior Bowl. So shout out Hunter, you were right about that way back in 2022. 6'2", 260, transferred up from Division II Southern Arkansas, was only a two-star recruit, so really not a highly rated player coming out of high school. Pretty typical for guys that are still down at this level. Mostly played wide receiver in high school, but he does have 12 sacks in 12 games this season, had 8.5 sacks in 11 games last season, so has been hyper productive, was hyper productive at Southern Arkansas as well. A little bit surprised that he hasn't transferred up. I'm sure he had some opportunities to move up to the G5 this season, but decided to stay at Central Arkansas, which is probably going to be something that some teams like. He's a captain this year. A lot of teams are going to like the fact that like he, stayed loyal to his program and did all this when he had the opportunity to go up and play at a G5 level. But a lot of teams are also going to have some questions about that because it's like, okay, why didn't you go up and try to improve your stock by playing against better competition? I would argue that sometimes the FCS is a similar level of competition to what you get at the lower levels of the G5, but that's a conversation for another time. Was number 76 on Bruce Feldman's Freaks list this season. If you don't know what that is, basically Bruce Feldman over at The Athletic writes up the top 101-ish. I think it's usually 100 or 101 athletes in college football, regardless of level. And so made it this year. Feldman says that Walker runs the 40 in 4.65, vertical jump of 36 inches. He's power clean 374 pounds. He's also squatted 615 and can bench 225 for 24 reps, which if you average all that out with the fact that he's 6'2", 260, I think that his athletic score is going to be very good. He's going to be a very, very high scoring player on the relative athletic score that will come out this spring. The problem with Walker, and I think the reason that he is not being talked about as like a huge draft prospect, other than the fact that he plays at the FCS level, and so there's going to be some level of competition concerns, is that he's not very long. I think that his arms are going to come in under 32 inches, which 32 inches is pretty much like the minimum benchmark that most teams have for like you can play NFL football really at all. 33 inches, I think typically either 32 or 33, it kind of varies on the team, is kind of the benchmark that teams have for offensive linemen to play tackle as well. And so if you think about just like if that's the benchmark to play tackle, it's probably also roughly the benchmark to play on the outside as an edge rusher. I think that there is a little bit of concern there because if you come in with, 31.5-inch arms or something like that, it's not the end of the world. You think like, that half inch doesn't really make a ton of difference. But in the NFL, when you're going to be going up against, some tackles that have 35, 36-inch arms or whatever, basically what it means is that he's never going to be able to get into the chest of these offensive tackles in the NFL because he doesn't have the length to do it. So he's going to have to win a different way, right? He's going to have to either like get around those guys with explosiveness. He's going to have to, find a different way. He's going to have to really be like a super high level technician in terms of hand fighting. Like there's going to have to be other ways that he wins. And right now, he doesn't really have a ton of that because his pass rush plan is a little bit limited. He doesn't really have like a counter move when his initial pass rush is stopped. And you can win that way at the FCS, and he has to great success this season. But I think the Senior Bowl is going to be really big for him. I think that showing that ability to win against what's going to be, power five power four, I guess now. I always get that mixed up now. But power four offensive tackles and, guys that have played at a super high level of college football their entire careers. I think that that's going to be really big for him to show that he can win in that way to kind of dispel some of those concerns that NFL teams might have about him. Closing out here with Oregon tight end Terrance Ferguson. Obviously, some of you guys will be familiar. I know there's a lot of overlap between Chargers fans and Oregon fans, especially with Justin Herbert on the team now. Ferguson is a true senior, 6'5", 255 pounds. His role in the offense has increased every season, which is what you like to see from a player. I think he has already set career highs in receptions and yards, if I have that right. Not quite receptions, but targets. That's what I was thinking of. So career high 52 targets already this season, 31 catches on those 52 targets for 442 yards. He's only found the end zone one time this season after finding it 5 and 6 times in 2022 and 2023, respectively. Super reliable hands, big catch radius. If you go back and like, if you are able to find a Terrance Ferguson highlight reel, there's a lot of catches where he extends like super far away from his body, really like gets the full extension, makes those plays, has a really good understanding of like where the sideline is, where the boundary line is, gets his foot down. Obviously in the NFL, would be get both feet down. I think he's a willing blocker. There's some room to improve there. You can sort of see on his frame that I think that there's probably a little bit of room to add some mass to help out that blocking ability right now. I think that like he shows good effort, he's got good technique. It's just really a power thing for him that he's missing right now. I think that of Oregon's three tight ends that they have that they play frequently between him and Kenyon Sadiq and Patrick Herbert, Justin's younger brother, I think that Ferguson is probably the worst blocker of the three, but that doesn't mean that he's a bad blocker. It just means that he's sort of an average one. And so if you're looking for more of like the pure receiving tight end, I think that this is more the direction that you would lean if you're the Chargers or if you're, a Chargers fan who wants them to add a receiving tight end next to Will Dissly. I think that this is more where you would look, sort of Hayden Hurst-y in that like his receiving ability is good, but not like necessarily like fantastic. I don't think that he's like the best receiving tight end in the world, and he's an okay blocker, but not a bad blocker, but also not like a great blocker either. I think he's a little bit stiff as a runner. I just don't really like the way that he runs. I think that his form is bad, if that makes sense. If you guys know a lot about me, you know that like I ran cross country and track in high school and cover cross country and track a little bit for the University of Washington. And so running form is always something that I kind of check out with some of these players. And I think that Ferguson's form is just kind of odd. He runs a little bit awkwardly, I think is the best way to say it. He does create a lot of separation. I think that like his route running ability is still pretty good, and he does have like the ability to make like sharp cuts at angles. But I think as a straight line runner, it's just kind of it looks a little bit off to me. So that's going to be something that like I'm going to have to dive into a little bit deeper before like I form my final opinion on this guy. Anytime that I talk about guys on the show in like October or November, like these are sort of my preliminary opinions on these guys. My opinions are always subject to change. Once we get into, February, March-ish, January, February, March-ish, then we'll have kind of more solidified opinions on these guys after I go back and I watch all their games from this season. Not as much time to do that when it's the middle of the season right now. So still kind of developing those thoughts, but I think right now that's kind of one of the things that I've noticed so far with him. I think that he's probably going to be a day two guy. Might get pushed down to day three just because of how deep this class is. I think that only getting into the end zone one time in a senior season where a lot of other tight ends have emerged is a little bit of a disappointment for him, I'm sure. But also, Oregon is going to have a lot more chances to show scouts what their players can do because they're the number one team in the country. Probably going to be undefeated, assuming that they beat my Huskies on Saturday. I think that they're gonna be poised to make a deep playoff run, and so there's gonna be more chances for all of the players on Oregon, including Ferguson, to kind of show scouts what they have against some really high level competition. And then Ferguson will also have the opportunity at the Senior Bowl, so plenty of time to dispel some of those concerns that I and potentially the NFL has about him. But I think that he'll kind of be right on that day two, day three fringe range, which is a good place to get a tight end. Obviously, there's going to be some matchup nightmare guys that are going to be gone a little bit earlier than that. Sometimes you see like a really great blocking tight end like sneak up into the second, third round range, like we saw with Tip Ryman last year. Drew Sample was a second round pick of the Bengals a few years ago. But sort of these like do it all, like jack of all trades, master of none type guys, a lot of times like third, fourth round, and they end up being pretty productive NFL players. I think that that is probably the range that I would have for Ferguson right now. That's going to do it for this week, guys. Hope you enjoyed. As always, we will be back presumably next week as long as my power doesn't go out and I don't have something catastrophic happen where I am unable to record for multiple days again. But we'll be back next week. We'll probably talk about like some conference championship, excuse me, if I can talk stuff or something like that. Maybe we'll go through some more all-star invites, but we're getting closer and closer to the beginning of draft season. I usually say that like December 15th or so is like the official start as we get like a month or so away from all-star games. So we're getting closer. Feel pretty good about where the Chargers are at. Obviously going to be a later first round pick as it stands right now. Looks like they're going to be a playoff team. So obviously stoked about that. Draft talk can wait a little bit, but if you are a draft nerd like me, draft talk can never wait. And so we will be back talking about all of those guys in future episodes. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a comment below as to which guys you were excited about, etc. Send me all your stuff, etc., etc., etc. See you guys next week. Peace.